Yeah, but they're also changing a lot.
Yeah, are they open?
No.
Changing for the better or worse?
Okay, now I'm going live, so we'll talk about this after.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, wait. So, let me just share the link and then I will start.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Okay. I'm putting the YouTube live link in the chat if you guys want to share it. And then okay.
What did you say?
The YouTube link, the live on YouTube, I just put that link in the
Okay. Yeah, it's all right. I don't think I can contact anybody now. That's okay.
Yeah.
No problem.
Okay. Hello everyone, we're back today to discuss a really interesting topic with a pretty incredible person. We have Mr. KB Jinan here with us, and he's done a lot of research on indigenous communities and learning, and his ideas about learning and education are really interesting, and it is what the future needs. And I'm grateful that we have the opportunity here for him to share what he's learned over the years with us. Mr. Jinan, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So, I first confronted this issue of education when I was in engineering, where I found that I never had any interest in school at all. So, but I thought somebody else might have. So in engineering, I found that in around second year, third year, I realized that in fact, nobody seems to be really passionate about learning. They were all getting good marks, but there was really no passion about learning. This is not just the students. I also didn't meet any teachers who were passionate about learning. They were very good teachers. I'm not telling anything about that. They are very good in terms of they want to teach. But I never found anybody who wants to learn, who are passions about learning, exploring. This I didn't find. And I realized that right through school, this was the case. You hardly met anybody who is really, they all talk about curiosity, but I never met many people who are really curious about wanting to know things. So this was so this is what actually made me, question this. And I also found that in engineering, that we only talk about Boyle's law, Charles' law, and things like that. And I never came across an Indian's name popping up anywhere, which is also another thing I felt that, I was wondering that, aren't there any Indian who did any work? Those are two things that really, set me off. And then next year, actually, in fact, I took a drop and started teaching in a primary school because I thought, let me, revisit this school. So, what schooling is all about, what happens to children. Because at that time itself, I realized that right from childhood, we are actually, it's like a, stage set for children, and there all the people around are directing them. And there was hardly any freedom for the child to. So this was something that was in my mind. So I spent that 1 year within the school, and I did some readings, Gandhiji and people like that. And but when I went back to take my degree next year, I went back. I took two decisions. One was never to do anything that you don't like to do. Second was never do a 9-to-5 job. These are two things not that I have any, money backing and all that, but I thought this is something that I shouldn't be doing because this is something that is really bad for your being. So I took the degree, but I never worked for a year or so, 2 years. Then I got into NID, National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad. It was fantastic there because that 3 years gave me a fantastic time for for kind of, I would call it, it was like a womb where I could do my rebirthing, because of course, I have to be careful in telling that NID has tremendous freedom, but the underlying structure there is ambience is very Western. So you have freedom to colonize yourself. This is the freedom that, that it offers. But since I was already very clear about this whole, somewhat clear about what is happening with education, I immediately realized that something is, the freedom must be used in a very different way, that I should really start exploring what is beauty, things like that. And another very important thing that took place in my NID day is that normal designing is really about and design is really about how that happens in a design school is that you plan first and then you go and do, meaning the initial thing is all mind. You plan, you draw, you think, and then once that is done, you go and do something. And that was creating some kind of a, I was not very happy with it. So what I did was that I started doing things just random. I would take wood, start doing clay. So different things I started taking and doing, and I realized that this doing is actually generating thinking. So I started reversing this process of experience first and then think about it. So that was a major shift that I did when I was at NID. It just happened automatically, not that I didn't know why this was happening. I only knew that this thinking was creating a lot of problems. So I thought, no, I shouldn't be engaging with that. So the next was to start doing, and I didn't know what to do, but so I just take materials and start exploring, hammering and, cutting and, and slowly something was really happening within that. And I was, so that was another important thing that took place. One more interesting thing that happened was that I started working in the ceramic department, even though I was not officially part of that. So luckily, the head of the department didn't want me to come there. So that was an added advantage, because since I was interested in working with clay, I started exploring everything on my own. And that actually opened up a completely new, process in me. See, normal, when somebody teaches you in anything, they will tell you these are the 4 methods by which you can work, and these are the few tools that you have. So by this teaching of method and tools, you're already getting trapped in a set system. So luckily, because that person didn't want me to come there, I started working with clay just like that. I had no idea how to do it, but and I keep telling this, that it is the clay that taught me how to engage. And that opened up a completely different process in me, and made me understand what actually means to learn. I mean, of course, this was only a beginning point, but it started showing me certain, things. And of course, at NID, the more damaging aspect is how our aesthetic sense get conditioned, because finally, when you go through schools, you are just colonized completely. And when you go through design and architecture art schools, your aesthetic sense is also completely conditioned. So your sense of beauty, your knowledge, everything gets colonized in this process. So that was another area that I really began to start working on, that what is beauty, how does it arise, things like that. So from NID, after I passed, I started, staying in Calcutta, and I started going to different schools, and started offering creativity classes and all that kind of stuff, and then luckily I was, invited to Nagaland for some work, and that really changed my whole approach to rural tribal people, because this was in 1989, 90, around that time. So when I went there, it was supposed to help them out, but I found that they're already doing fantastic life. They are having very nice life. So, and I felt their life, their whole structure was much better than a mainstream India. So I was wondering, what are we actually doing with these people? What is that we are wanting to change in them? I was at a loss. And then again, I got more opportunity to work with artisan communities in different parts of India. Over in Bengal, in Orissa, in Andhra, several places. And again, I found that this whole NGO activity, which is to convert others, was actually damaging. And I realized that it is actually we who needs to change. It is they who should teach us, because at a very important level, that culturally they are much more rooted than the educated Indian. Educated Indian is basically like a NRI, but they are RNIs, resident non-Indians, because their beingness doesn't belong here, because they are whatever they have learned, it is all from the Western understanding of knowledge. So this living with rural tribal people changed my complete, perception completely, because I found uh, very important thing that I found is that the way children learn there and the way parents treat their children are so fundamentally different to the modern, what is happening in the modern condition. In the traditional or in the rural tribal communities, no parenting is happening. Children are free. Children are, you see, this freedom is another important word that we must, contemplate. Because in the modern context, it is as if that somebody will give you freedom, like they say that, America is free, or, that kind of thing. But when I really started living with rural tribal people, I found that freedom is actually an existential quality. It's not something that you can give. It is actually in freedom that life is actually happening. And this freedom exists for a child in a rural tribal area, because that child never ever asks permission for doing anything. And this is also the case with the parents, because the parents are never worried about where the child is. So they also have a trust, fundamental trust, which is very different from an insecure modern man. They have trust in life. So they don't go around looking after their child. The child would leave in the morning and come back in the evening. The parents are completely, free from any fear. This I found very, very important aspect of living, because when we compare our life, we are constantly under pressure, constantly insecure. 2 minutes the mother or the father cannot leave their child. They have to continuously monitor what the child is doing. This actually is causing several, a deep psychological damage to the child. See, many of the damages are actually very subconscious level. This is not very conscious level. For example, an educated person is bound to feel superior. It is not that he wants to feel superior, but the fact that the person gets educated, that the very organization of this subconsciously built in an inbuilt superiority complex in the educated person. So you will see an educated person's behavior to the child or to a rural tribal person is always as a superior person. So this is what I mean by subconscious conditioning. And now this is, so in the rural tribal belt, one thing that I really found was that, because I used to work with, traditional artisan communities. One very important thing I noticed was that there was never teaching happening in these communities. And the artisans' children are learning on their own. I mean, even the word learning doesn't exist. They're doing and they are coming to know. So even the word learning is a strange word which has been invented by modernity. Because these are processes that are so fundamentally natural that we have put in certain kind of, we have made it into such a complicated thing that it's very difficult even to say certain words. For example, if you look at the word teaching, teaching is a word that doesn't exist in any of the oral Indian languages. Any of the rural languages, teaching word doesn't exist. In fact, I remember a friend telling me that when he went to this village, the village people were telling him, "Can you learn our children?" The learning term was more familiar, but teaching was never there. But of course, now we have invented that word because that has come to stay in our societies as a, an important facet. So what I was telling was that because learning is the most natural thing, children were automatically learning what is happening around them. So a potter's child learned pottery without any teaching. The child is observing, the child is making certain things, and in that process, understanding how to be a potter. So, so basically, the fundamental issue is that modernity has, uh, you know, institutionalized this whole process called learning. This is where the whole problem arises. And this can also be traced to literacy. One thing that happened during my stay in a village was that I used to read a lot, lots of books. And I was staying in this beautiful village where I was staying with the potters. And next to my house was a weavers, 2, 3 weavers family. On the other side, there were shepherds, there were bamboo artisans, there were farmers. So this village had actually all kinds of craftsmen. A beautiful place, river just near to us. All this, but I was spending all my day trying to read books. I had several books, and I would read one after the other. 2, 3 books opened up. So one day I suddenly realized the uselessness of all this. I have come to this village, and I have come to live in these places to understand them. But here I was trying to read and understand them through the books written by the Westerners. That whether if you want to understand Indian, they're only the sociology books, anthropology books. Even if it is written by an Indian, it is through the framework that has been created by the Western academia. And I found this is absolutely absurd. And but I must be very thankful to Thoreau, because I was reading Walden Pond, and it's a fantastic description of his life in that in Walden. But I remember towards the half I had to stop because he was talking about experience, and here I was denying my experience of a beautiful place. I also realized that reading was actually framing me to see the world in a certain way. So I completely quit reading after that for a few years. And this also made me understand certain important processes that literacy has brought into the modern mind. Because if you look at the modern situation, modern cognition, it is really about reading, thinking, and making up more and more stories. The experience part is completely left out. There is no senses functioning. Eyes don't function to see anything. Eyes is functioning to read. So this was another interesting thing that I began to observe living in that village where hardly anybody knew how to read and write, but they were fantastic lives. They were more contented. Everybody was busy all the time. There was no sense of boredom. And I also found that because most educated people think that they are very creative, and the rural people are idiots. They don't know anything. But I realized that when I stayed very close, I realized it's actually the reverse. Educated people think they are creative. Actually, they are not, because they have the arrogance of memory that they have stored some information inside. But learning is not a process that has to do anything to do with memory. Learning is actually about creation of knowledge, which requires you to be open. To be, your senses are alive. You're observing, you're experiencing, you're doing. Now, this is precisely what a rural tribal person was doing. He was constantly engaging with the world. The materials he was exploring, and the materials were telling him what to do with it, with these materials. So I found that that this difference was very stark. That that when I quit reading, I began to understand two ways of knowing that was taking place. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that the modern way of learning is, I would say it's a very distorted way of knowing, because you are reading and making up all the stories. A simple example I would like to take, that I feel today that the most misunderstood being are children, because modernity has completely misunderstood children, precisely because they have created a frame to see children. One of the major aspect of modernity is that it always see the other as inferior. Of course, modernity is way is continuously to create binaries, two things. and hierarchy is always created, and they would always claim the superior. The way they talk about I am illiterate and they are illiterates. No, so who created this word, literate and illiterate? Developed and underdeveloped. So every time modernity creates this kind of hierarchy, which also means that whoever is weak, they think they need their help. The weak needs the superior's help. This deficit syndrome is embedded in modernity. So children would be treated as somebody who needs help. This is exactly the way they look at nature also. Nature is something they have to control and make it better. So the same thing with children. Children are treated as something that requires your help. And then you create all kinds of things to help children out. And so that very condition upsets the child very subconsciously, impacts the child very subconsciously. The fact that you treat a child as incapable, it impacts the children at a deep subconscious level. Even the fact that you create a school to learn creates the first fundamental existential damage to the child, because learning is the nature of life. Learning is not an afterthought. All living beings are knowing. They are all existing in knowing. So knowing is the first fundamental principle of life. So a child that is knowing, living, that you are telling, no, you go there, somebody will teach you. That is where you will get knowledge. This is an absolutely absurd idea. And of course, all this impacts in a very subconscious level, So the misunderstanding that the child has is by modernity has created certain categories and certain words to look through. For example, they have created something called learning, playing, and working. 3 different activities, because if you go into any rural area, you will find that, or whenever you leave a child alone, they would do every activity. Actually, what they have is playfulness. They are not playing. Playfulness is a quality which has been turned into noun. This is another interesting thing about modernity. Modernity continuously create nouns, whereas you go into tradition, that is about verb. Their language would have more verb, and modernity will have more nouns, because the nouns are, it's actually interesting that our starting point is noun, because what the text gives you is knowledge. See, when you're dealing with ready-made text, you're already dealing with noun. You're dealing with knowledge. You're not dealing with knowing. You're not in the process of knowing. That has been taken out. Whereas a rural tribal person goes through the process of knowing. It is in this process of knowing or experiencing that understanding is taking place within us. Whereas in the modern mind, it is all written down. You read, you think with your mind, you do reasoning, and then you imagine that you have understood it. So there is a completely different process that has been set in place by the 2 acts. One, teaching. Second, reading, meaning with engaging with ready-made knowledge. So this ready-made knowledge even can be not just reading, but any digitized knowledge is also ready-made. Anything that is given to you, to learn are ready-made knowledge. Otherwise, and now they have created another interesting myth called democratization of knowledge. I think what modernity has done is to kill that democracy, that access to knowledge, by telling that knowledge is in the book. You have to read and understand. See? Because actually, knowledge is accessible to you anytime, because you are knowing all the time. It's through your senses that you come to know. So, in fact, they kill this democracy by misleading you into believing that this knowledge is in the book. So let me come back to children. What is the fundamental mistake that modernity has done about children? See, children are basically biologically equipped to learn the real world. So what I say is that literates learn the word, illiterates learn the world. And now there is a vice versa situation in this. Like from childhood, whatever you're engaging with will basically form your structure of the brain. Your mind is formed by what you engage with and how you engage with. So when in the modern context, they are instructing, they are teaching, they are telling no. So already your autonomy is taken out. Then they will give you books and, story books and all kinds of cartoon and everything to teach you. So, and what is the brain doing then? The brain is continuously analyzing somebody's information. This is what modern, educated man's brain is all about. It's an analytical brain. Whereas something that is, a child that has not been taught, but who uses the senses to explore, is actually creating an explorer's brain. It's a learning mind. Whereas an educated mind is a learned mind. It's an analytical mind. So what actually happens is that when learning the world, children, and there is a natural system that has been given by nature to learn the real world. Now, this is area that there has been no study at all, because I would like to show you a simple thing that I've asked that in many places, that people would keep the book like this. In childhood, when you get a book, you keep like this, and then you say this is a house. Why is that everybody is doing this? This is my, almost in most places I have seen that they say that, yes, I have taken a book and kept like this and say that's a house or a tent. Why is everybody doing this? Another thing that I find invariably people have done is that they will put bed sheet over a table and they say that's a house. So they play the house by just putting bed sheet. This is another thing that I find many people have done. Third thing is that with whatever is available, with chair or table, whatever is available, pillow, in childhood we make the house. So three activity of the house, which is the form, how it looks like, the function, and the process. These three activities is what child is doing throughout. The child is actually only involved in cognitive activity. They are not at all doing this notion of play. Play is a very wrong understanding. Children are playfully exploring the world, and they are trying to understand the real world, not the written word. And this there is a clear-cut system given by. So if you look at any activity a child is doing spontaneously, you will find that you can place these activities within this 4, 5. I'll tell you, the other things I'll tell you. One is the form, what it looks like, what is the function, the purpose of that, the process of making, then the structure, understanding how the structure is, what is the material. For example, in material, you would have seen that when children sit on a sofa, they start bouncing. Why is every child doing this? But the child doesn't do it when the chair is hard. So you will find that there is a universal response in children when they engage with things around. So one, they are trying to remake the world. They are not playing. They don't need toys at all. In fact, toy is it's more dangerous than schools. By giving a toy, you are then telling the child, play. Learning is something else. So this whole natural cognitive activity, which is to understand the real world, which is to touch, feel, remake, imagine, all that actually is embedded in children. It is actually the adults have absolutely no role at all, except don't take away their freedom. Don't take away their autonomy. This is all the adult has to do. And of course, the adult has created a very, very bad anti-life environment for children. That's another important thing, because in modern households, hardly anybody does anything. The child never sees anything happening, So the child actually has to see the processes of life. They have to see how rain falls, how a plant grows. The process of nature is something that the child has been taken away from. The child then has to actually see the real world, because it is the real world that the child is understanding. So actually then if you start looking at it, you will find that this whole modern education has alienated people from their own being. Modern education has denied our biological aspect of learning. Learning is fundamentally a biological aspect, like because the processing is happening within you, and not the modern process. Modern educational process is a mental process, because you read, you imagine, you understand, you do permutation, combination, you create more mental stories. what is called as hypothesis or anything like that, So you keep making up more and more stories in the head. And, actually, I have been looking at the development of cognitive science in the modern scenario. And I find it is so interesting that cognitive science in the modern cognitive science is not it is not evolved wanting to understand how the brain works, or it's actually evolved because there was an interest in artificial intelligence. So it is actually artificial intelligence that actually initiated modern cognitive science. And if you look at the initial phase of cognitive science, it's only about the mind. It's only much later they are now talking about body is important. How come they understood the body is important? A friend was telling this was again prompted by the robotic. So there is a total absurdity, or completely wrong priority being given to what is knowledge, how is it for making more machines, or is it for a better life? Better life means what? Having more products, or more more peaceful and simple life. So these are basically the basic issue of modern. So would you want anyone to ask anything, or is there any?
Mhm.
That
I
would
have
be
a
better.
question.
Yeah, please.
So, what is so for young people who are part of this education system but realize that realize what is happening and that we
Yeah.
need to be more connected with nature, what can we do?
See, let me tell you, whatever modernity is offering of alternative is more dangerous. It gives you a notion that it is the solution. It's actually more dangerous because see, if you look at alternative education or homeschooling, none of that actually addresses this fundamental issue of biological process involved in learning, involved in knowing. See, number one, knowing is an automatic natural process. That is why they have this term called self-organization. Self-organization is the inputs have gone in. It's simple. Actually, if you remember how you learned your mother tongue, did you actually make any effort to learn? It just went in. And especially somebody from Bangalore, look at the Bangalore slums. Children, by the time they reach 4 years, can speak almost 4 to 5 languages. No effort to learn. They are just there. That's all. They are not even paying attention. It's just going in. Even that is not your choice. They are there in the context where 4, 5 languages are being spoken, and it all goes in. And then 3, 4, 5 years, they're all able to speak 4, 5 languages with no effort. Which means that the system that organizes information is not in your control. That's a very important thing to understand. What we can control is the input. It's like food. Digestion, you have no control. But of course, you can eat whether you want to eat chocolate or you want to eat sabji, or whether you want to eat mutton. That option is yours. So if you want to learn Chinese, French, English, that's your choice. But don't make an effort to learn, or try to understand what is the natural process that we already have. See, even if you want to create a school, why don't you create after understanding the natural process of understanding? See, how come that most of us hate most of the subjects that we learn? So my first warning is that don't go after alternatives. Alternatives are nothing but another format of modernity only. Modernity is actually playing tricks that, when you're rebelling, they'll give you another, small slot. No, you rebel here. If you, unless we take our senses back, there is absolutely no way you can, see, reasoning is another trap that everybody is celebrating. What exactly reasoning actually? No, you can only reason with what you know. When somebody gives you information, you can do reasoning with that. Reasoning is not a creative tool at all. It's not a learning tool. When somebody gives you information, you can fool around with it, and actually what it does, it actually helps you to store that information. It's the difference between rote memorization and this is that one. It's easily recallable. It's organized and kept in your head. what reasoning does to you, and then we create the myth called creativity. Some people have, you have to teach, so modernity has actually placed you in a completely wrong realm within which you're trying to do all the exploration. That realm, you see, for example, when I realized there's something problem with schools, I never questioned the basic framework. I was again going there teaching them how to be creative and all that kind of nonsense, without really understanding creativity is the very basis of life. Every child is creative because the child is continuously, see, what is creativity? Or what condition is required for creativity to happen? That when you are in the realm of unknown, the only response is that you have to be creative. And a crawling child is being creative. A child that is climbing up this chair is being creative, because I don't think the child is seeing the father doing that. No, the father doesn't crawl. No. So what the most thing that children do in the first 3 years is absolutely creative. So creativity fundamentally means that in the realm of unknown, creativity is bound to happen. But modernity completely closes this by putting known as the basic space to function. So within the format of known, within the paradigm of known, naturally reasoning will happen. Naturally arrogance will happen because you feel very certain. Where does certainty come from? Certainty comes from that you have read and you have understood it. No, you see. Actually, this is another kind of superstition, that's all. Modern education system is nothing but another kind of superstition. Just because people say it is scientific, you believe it. This is all what is happening. And the whole system is designed in such a way that if you don't give the right answer, then you don't pass. You cannot give your answer. You have to give the answer that is given. There is no place for exploration. So what I'm trying to say is this, that initially I was also doing a lot of alternative kind of stuff. That's why I went into, NGOs and things like that. But then I realized all these are nothing but more and more framework of modernity. So I actually wouldn't blame West for this. To me, text is the villain. The printing press is what actually created the modern West. If you look at the whole rationality game, it's all coming from dealing with what is known. Where does their certainty come from? Again, it is the text. The printed text gives them a notion of certainty. The fear of unknown, the fear of intangible, this is all coming from, right from childhood, you are dealing with certainty. You're dealing with known. You are never in the realm of unknown. So naturally, intangible is a problem for modern man. Uncertainty is a problem. So that is why they are always in the mode of controlling, planning, completely killing any spontaneous activity that can happen. Where life is actually spontaneous. Life doesn't plan and then do. It's spontaneous. So let me just tell this, that at least for me, when I stopped reading, my senses began to work again, and I stopped reading for quite some time. And what that did to me was that I realized it's on hindsight. It was not purposeful. On hindsight, I found that my reasoning mind stopped functioning. I began to see. This seeing became more natural to me and more permanent. You see, for a modern educated person, their physical and mental things are at two places. They are physically present, mentally absent. Or because they're always in the mind, they're hardly ever present totally. No, so for them it is an effort to experience. That's why they have this term experiential learning. Now, that's a very funny term actually, experiential learning, which also means that there is non-experiential learning, which also means that there are moments when you're not in experience. Is that possible? See, you are never out of experience. Not even a second you're out of experience. Yeah, your mind is not taking part in that experience. That's a different matter. See? So you actually, just by looking at the absurd way modernity uses language, you can understand this is all absolute nonsense. Now they are talking about embodiment. That's a new sudden discovery that body is important. I find this very strange, that how the mind is trying to trick, and then people are still trapped in that mental game. That's what I'm talking about. Even the body that has been discovered in the modern West is again a problematic thing. It is not the body in its real body. It's actually the mind discovering the body. That's not the real body. Real body is available only with children and only with rural tribal people. And only with people who have understood the game that the mind is playing and stopped intellectualizing this.
Yeah.
So that is a very important thing that, in fact, I actually have been offering courses in design and architecture in the foundation year, the first year. And only thing I do is to have two things I respect in them, that I give back the autonomy. I don't make any corrections. Second, I tell them, use your senses. All learnings must happen in your experience. You go and explore. So it's very important that how do we resensitize our senses? How do we look at the habits, wrong habits, that cognitive habits, psychological habits that has been instilled in that first 18 years of your life? That the very fact that we don't know how to hold a question is the most important damage, because immediately we want an answer. We cannot hold a question. This is the biggest damage of modern mind, that you don't allow an answer to come on its own. That's how it actually happens. You pay attention, answer comes to you. It's not magic. It's a biological process, actually. When I looked at children, it's not my choice. I see children I've been seeing for the last 10, 15 years. And just the seeing has made things more and more clear. So my understanding of how the child learns, what is the processes that exist, what is the tool they're using, abilities that are there, everything came to me because I just started observing them. That's all. I was not making up a story around it. I was not making up theory. Theory is something that builds up automatically, provided you are paying attention. And attention again is not once in a while, that you are in attention all the time.
You have questions?
Yeah.
I hope I pronounced your name right. Arcoprovo is asking, what about self-organizing learning environments?
Again, this, I was looking at some term called self-directed learning. See, all these are nonsensical terms modernity is creating. Modernity must stop creating. See, unschooling is another terrible term that they have discovered. See, what is unschooling? Without schooling, can there be unschooling? So they are actually creating reactionary terms. You see, one very important thing that one must understand is that knowing is an egoless process. Knowing is not a choice. So why is that the modern man has far more ego? Is because he thinks that he can learn. That's his problem. Knowing is not a choice. Breathing is not a choice. If your senses are alive, you're observing, you're present, it is happening all the time to you. It's not a choice at all. But learning can be more humble, provided you understand the fragility of this exploration. Simple example, I tell you, that suppose, that the way we learned language without any effort. But if you pay, and if you remember, most of us hated grammar when it was first introduced in the classroom. And I think most of us ended up hating it forever, grammar. But if you imagine a situation where you learn to speak very well, and then you are given an opportunity to observe how you are speaking, observe how others are speaking. From that paying attention to language being spoken, you will be able to decode a certain kind of pattern that are emerging, which will then be put together and we will understand what grammar is. So what it actually involves is paying more attention to how you're speaking. It's not a mental game. You're paying more attention. And I call this as metacognition. Metacognition is, you see, why, what, how, all the three are involved in observation, in paying attention. In a normal situation, we only use the what. For example, language is spoken, you picked up by just listening what is being spoken about. The moment you are interested in how he is speaking, how language is being spoken, this is another attention. It is not in absence that you think of how or why. Both how and why, if you can hold it in the presence, you know, and then which also means that you're more sensitive, more attentive. See, it's the quality of the person that is getting built and built. It's not your amazing more and more knowledge. It's really about your own fine-tuning, your own sensitive, no, your own fineness that happens. More attentive you become. So you add how to understand what is the grammar. So actually these three are part of the presence, part of exploration, which is something that the modern, because people think that because the whole schooling is about absence. No, what is schooling does to you? It makes you absent. None of the thing that you learn is present. So permanently modern man is absent. Whereas if you look at the traditional life system, everything is to make you present. I'll give you one very important example. Look at the traditional calendar system. Traditional calendar is about observation. I remember one day, few years ago, my mother came out and told, today is Vrishtigam 1. She felt a change in the wind and then she told the date of that day. Can that happen in the modern calendar? It cannot happen. You have to go and find out, oh, today is April 3rd or whatever, you know. You have to look at the calendar. By experiencing the presence, you will not be able to understand what is the day today. Now, this is the difference between how tradition was ensuring you to be present, whereas modernity is making you absent. That is why in modernity you have to go for meditation, and you know, all the gurus are in modernity only because you are absent all the time. So for at least some number, you do meditate and be present. Whereas in tradition or with children, they are permanently in presence. You know? So
Yeah. Okay. Shirshendu wants to ask a question.
please,
Hello, sir. Thank you for the amazing talk. Uh,
damaging
um,
talk.
yeah, I have been. I think it's a good thing about the experience part that you have been talking about.
Yeah.
I have a question that, sir, like in science, I have heard that people have been observing nature for a long time, and as they observe in their lifetime, they have also documented whatever they have observed. And I
Yeah.
think many lifetimes go, and after that, we learn some, as we know today, simple truths like the Earth is moving around the sun. So
Yeah.
for the people who have actually discovered that, I think they have spent almost a lifetime in knowing about this truth. So
Yeah.
as you were saying, sir, about the concept of reading, so
Yeah.
the amount of work that they have done, they have documented and put in books, which we get now directly. So
Yeah.
once we read them, we get to know about the work they have done, and
Mm.
taking that knowledge, we also start trying to know about more things, observing the nature in more fine-tuning way. So,
No,
sir,
does that happen? I know the story, I know, but does that actually happen? You know, this is a grand story that people talk about. Does it actually happen? Do you, in your class, has there been any attention being paid to awakening your senses?
no,
You
sir.
see, the most important thing is that do you have a learner mind or an analytical mind? Do you have a slave's mind? The problem is not knowledge. The problem is you and me. What is the kind of being that we are? You know,
Mhm.
are we paying attention to life around? No. Does any school talk about paying attention? Does any school talk about senses? No, I'm actually completely against Montessori, because there cannot be a method for all these things. See, the problem with the Western system is that everything they want to create method and trap you into that method.
Yes, sir.
Our senses doesn't function in that method, and senses are functioning all the time. It just depends at that particular time. If somebody is singing, then your ear will be there. You know, a crow is crowing, then your ear will go. Somebody comes and gives you some food, you'll eat that. So senses have a role that has been assigned by nature. It's there, you know. So you can't make it into a system. That is what, you know. So see, the point is that it is, so whoever has learned, it is good for them. See, for Newton, it was an authentic experience. For you and me, it's a third-rate experience.
Yes.
Newton, when he was about to die, I mean, I have heard about this, that he was describing, that he's somebody who was, towards the end of his life, that he felt that he knows almost nothing. That is the humility that a person like Newton has got. You tell me that in your educated people's, nearby, have you met anybody that humble, who are humbled by knowledge? See, please understand this. It is the quality of the being that is more important than the knowledge that you carry.
Yes.
Understand? We have no capacity. See, another thing I want to tell you, that if you don't have a learning mind, if you have an analytic mind, you will never understand Newton. That's another problem. You may have read him. You will not understand him.
Yes.
See, I understand Montessori very well because I know how senses function, not because I've read her. I know it because I have experienced it myself, my own senses. And then I have looked at how children do these things. I have actually thousands of videos on children. I have studied, lots of images of children. Let me also tell one more small thing, which is again about a misconception called art. Art is again another trap that modern teachers plays, because people are assuming that art is a way to fight, modernity. This is absolutely absurd. It's actually sense of beauty. This is again a quality. Art again is it's do with something that you do outside. No. What I want to say is that I have studied drawings done by children, spontaneous drawings done by children, from 3-4 years to 10-12 years children. I have studied the whole drawings, and I found that drawing is nothing but a cognitive act in which they are trying to understand the three-dimensional world in terms of two-dimensional space. This is what drawing is. Drawing is not art at all. Drawing is 100% cognitive act in which the 2D and the 3D are understood in a very integrated manner. And another very important thing is that when I observed how small children create language, how they connect the word and the world. And again, if you don't teach, then the child will retain the integrity of, or create integrity of word and the world. It will be one kind of experience, world and the word together. Whereas what is happening in our modern educated people is that the word is absent. We only know the word. We play with the word. So this is another trap. Art is another trap which has to be. So actually, the total paradigm of modernity needs to be relooked at. Any solution that is happening within the modernity is going to be more mental damage. But we might have a feeling that we are all, saving the earth. That's another tragedy that is happening. Wanting to save the earth. Save yourself first. Regain your beingness. That is the most important saving that can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Shubham Day is asking, you said about better life, so how would you define it? Is it having more products or living simple?
Absolutely no.
If
Absolutely
simple,
no.
then how do we compare the inventions and discoveries that mankind has made?
You see, now it's interesting that when you look at this is a good time to talk about what is really necessary. If you actually, look at how much actually we need to live, and what is essential, this quarantine is teaching us, You see, so this is again a myth. Actually, the best word they have invented to cheat you is a word called aspiration. You see, I have, enough time I have lived with rural tribal people. They have never felt they are poor. So these terms are marketing terms and political terms. When they say underprivileged, there are two ways of putting you down. One politically, and then, they want to make you feel privileged by, buying new products. This is what it is. You go to any village, a simple village, you will find that they are extremely happy with what they have. Or you take a child, for example. If you don't, child will never cry for anything unless you train the child and make them feel that no, this is an important thing that they want. Child will never cry for, one thing that the child wants is freedom. Freedom to be, to explore, and that you deny. Instead, you give them products, no, to fool around, to play around, no. So a happy life, I feel, is nothing to do with products, nothing to do with all these inventions, but to feel contented with life. That doesn't require products at all. People living in, simple houses, flooring, no furniture, they are extremely happy, unless you go and poke fun at them and say, no, you're poor, everybody, the whole government, educated, everybody is pushing this idea on them now. And then are you happy? This is another interesting thing. You see, the word boredom, the experience of boredom is purely a modern phenomenon. Boredom doesn't exist in rural tribal people. Other very important thing that I have discovered is that, I know many people who do not know their age. I believe they are living in timelessness. It is we who know our age have, made time into a, now you're about to go, It's a different experience altogether. You see, the abundance was lost when we started quantifying. Otherwise, the sense of abundance is part of your biological makeup. It's a psychological damage to feel that things are not there to live. So quantification needs to be understood, how it has damaged literacy and quantification, all this needs to be understood, how it damaged your consciousness, how it impacted your way of being, in the earth as part of. You see, look at how modern people look at nature. For them, nature is outside. Na? Nature is outside for them. They are not nature. They have to go to nature. I mean, this is the alienation that.
Yeah. Thank you. Manish Jain says hello.
Hello.
And he
Hey.
says we love you. And Arco Provo is says thank you for your talk and answer about what you said about the printing press. Wasn't it the written script and building on it that helped us acquire more diverse knowledge like calculus and genetics?
Well, I think we have not understood that how it has, damaged whole lot of people. You see, in tradition, there was always, very carefully looked at how to engage with language. You see, I remember a friend was telling me that in traditional societies, when sloka is taught to them, slok, Sanskrit slok, it is never explained to them. So you memorize it and you keep it. Understanding will take place when the actual event takes place. So understanding was never done within the realm of language. The language was kept there, not to be, so what is happening today is that we are creating understanding within the realm of language. So language has a role. I'm not telling language doesn't have a role, but we must know how to use it. It cannot become it cannot structure our cognition. It cannot structure the way the eye function. You see, the modern man's eye is a thinking tool. It's not a seeing tool. So why has it happened? So the restructuring of our cognitive system is the fundamental problem. So if we understand this very well, then we should know how to use these as tools. How can you use a written matter as a tool? How can you use computer as a tool? Not that it wires your system and then you function as per its demands. Why have you become rational? Rationality is the result of dealing with reasoning all the time. You're dealing with the known all the time. So what is actually I've done deeper study on what has happened to our senses and how the written text has reformatted us, Now what is happening today? There is a, what the digital technology is doing is another very interesting thing to look at. It has actually brought in two senses in a very distorted way. It is seeing and hearing, but these are edited, miniaturized. It is really not working on our senses in the manner that our senses should function. It's extremely distorted. Our senses, you see, we are a potential. Human child is a potential. This potential needs to be awakened by the conditions that exist. Even our ability to walk is not certain. We have to be drawn into that. Every activity, the physical, I remember one child that is brought into a orphanage. I had met him after 3-4 years after the child was brought in. He was actually walking and talking like completely somebody who has disability completely. And so this person was telling me that when he was brought in, he had some problem, and within 3-4 years he became absolutely normal. So we found out, I was asking what was this. So his father and mother both had certain deformity, physical deformity. They are walking, talking, everything was in a straight, in a deformed way. So the child picked up this from his parents. And I have seen another person who a child used to limp because his father was limping. And of course, there are even extreme cases in which the feral children, like there is a case of a girl who was looked after by dogs who couldn't walk at all. She was behaving like dogs, eating, walking, everything like a dog. So the human being is basically a potential. This potential has to be awakened, and there is a huge potential of awakening. It depends on what is awakening us. So we are now awakened by the written text and the digital tools. This is our awakening. Our awakening must be of the real life that is around. Our senses must actually meet the real world that is around us every time. But we are closing us into this small box. And of course, there is so much of arrogance in this, This is what the whole problem I'm finding. Why is the modern people so arrogant? Why there is no humility?
Yeah.
So I think there are certain fundamental cognitive rewiring that these tools are doing. And I think it is these levels that one must begin to rework, How do we reassign these things as our tools and not our masters? These are our masters because they are forming our system. A friend was telling recently that literates learned a word, so they have a word view. They don't have a world view. They read, and they create world view, word view. Because that is all what they know. It's a similar thing with digital. Digitalization is creating far more damage. Of course, I don't know whether there is any hope because more and more effort is being spent to make the whole schools into digital format. So I don't think there is enough work happening to understand how is the things that you engage is wiring your brain. And this basically happens in childhood. You have to look at the child from the time it is born up to 10-12 years. That's the maximum you get by the time the system is formed. At that time, the child must be formed by the real world and not by the written word, or it's these kind of things. This is what I feel.
Okay. Arvinder Singh is asking, on the calendar point and the date as per the direction of the wind, what is your prediction for the future, especially with the way the climate is changing?
No, that I'm quite.
Okay. So we do realize the flaws and like how technology and modernity is not really enabling us to be, but at the same time, like completely like changing is not like possible.
Actually, you see, listen, I feel we must not try to change the world. Change yourself. That's all. Person at a time. You change. Don't see, the problem with modernity is that it is never addressing the real problem. The real problem is you and me. So we want to escape by wanting to help others. So you will create an NGO, you want to help others, you will go there, you'll go to Africa, in all those places. So the problem is us. They are not the problem. They don't need your help at all. Change us one person at a time, and then let's see. I don't have any, dream that, this is going to happen. But I think this is what it is. So I change me. That's it. And then slowly, I because this has been my life. I have done so much of work in this area, scholarship, so much of research, so much of documentation. And I'm trying to use that and, slowly tell others, that with the proof. And most things I'm talking about is common sense. It doesn't require another book to read. This is what is happening with the modern knowledge system. Can you sit in a cognitive science research and understand as a new person? No. All these words are completely foreign. But it's not complicated at all. Simplify it, because this is all so simple actually. It has to be understood at this level that anybody should be able to understand. So,
last question, with respect to sustainability.
Pardon?
With respect, like,
yeah,
when people don't understand the differences, but you want them to understand sustainability, or like reconnecting with nature, people who live in the modern world, or like don't use technology as tools, but like live in their heads, based on your experiences and like living with like the traditional way, and like reconnecting with your senses, how to get people to be more sustainable without explaining all of this to them.
You see, they have created all kinds of systems to escape. A simple example, take sustainability. Sustainability is a word that shouldn't even come out of our mouth. Sustainability is the way of nature. It's nature's design. And it is not yours and my sustainability. Sustainability of whole life. But today what is happening is that modern man is hijacking this and thinking of his sustainability. Sustainability is not a personal idea. It's an existential idea. It is the whole life. Your company, my company, no, there's no sustainability there. So this is the major issue, that we are not thinking from an existential mind. We are so small in our, thinking, that we are only thinking about our, So, I mean, this is a huge crisis, actually. I think this is a huge cognitive crisis. And I really don't have any, in fact, I have an organization called Existential Knowledge Foundation. And people keep asking me, what is your time frame? Initially, I used to say 600-700 years, but now I say more than 1,000 years. I mean, that's a scope of this work, because the more and more damage is happening, the more and more research is going in the wrong direction. You see, the problem with modernity is that, they are very, very sincere in doing the wrong thing. This is the problem. All researchers, if you find, they are so much time they are devoting, but for the wrong cause, So the more and more wrong research is taking place, there is no way. I mean, you have to keep doing what you're doing, and hoping that, well, one day things will change. That's it.
Yeah. All right, any final questions? Okay. Ooh. If you were to disembark scholarship and embark on scholar boats, how should you imagine such boats?
You see, the traditional knowledge system was like that. Traditionally, it's all happening in communities. See, today the problem is that, see, take this example, that why, you see, learning to speak is very important, that we are learning. Why do you want everybody to learn grammar? Has it succeeded anyway? You see? Now, suppose, see, the thing is this, that suppose you find 2-3 people interested in grammar, then you find a place for that. Why do you want to force everybody to do maths, physics, chemistry, mathematics, every subject? And finally, at least in my case, I have not liked any subject. None of this I enjoyed. What was the timing? What was the point in wasting all my life for this nonsense? So I think this, number one, is that knowledge should be for true sustainability and for making you more humble, understanding life at a much deeper level so that you live more lightly, like probably what Newton would have done, you know. See, true scientists, even in the West, they are very different. Authentic scientists. I'm not talking about the PhD scientists. I'm talking about truly authentic scientists. They have been actually in an experiential mode throughout. You know, you take any big scientist, true scientist, they all have been in the realm of experience. It is only the second-hand people who have been educated, you know, and taken out of this authenticity, you know, who are just nothing but clones and slaves, and you know, this is what it is. So we have to, you know, I mean, to me, my most important point is that we must, you see, the problem with modernity is that every time they decide what to do and then start doing. This is the biggest problem of modernity. I think we must stop doing what is not good and things will emerge as we are engaging with it. So this is diametrically opposite to modernity's approach. Modernity always wants to have a final point for which they are going to work. So planning is important. They always want to bring in certainty. We have to move into uncertainty and just, you know, enjoy that path. Only that will show us, the right way to live and the right way to organize things, you know. And it'll happen, provided, you know, people are willing to, you know, do the, you know, the thing is that all traditional communities are living in that uncertainty realm. So it's not something that is dangerous. You know, that is how people have been always living. It is only because you are bringing in certainty to the child that the child is getting afraid of uncertainty. It's a simple thing. It doesn't require many generations. In one generation, you can change the system, provided that the condition that you create for a child has to be in the realm of unknown, uncertainty, and no teaching. And of course, the cognitive autonomy is granted. But that is the most important thing, cognitive autonomy. That's the most important right. You know, that will solve.
Okay. Last question. How does hospitality relate to what you call true science?
But
How does hospitality relate to what you call true science?
what is hospitality and science? I don't understand this.
Yes,
Hospitality,
yes.
I understand in the sense that you go to a rural person's house, they will treat you very well without asking any question, and you can't do it in modernity. That much hospitality I've understood. That you go to a, you know, person from a village. You know, I'll tell you one very, very interesting thing. You know, one friend was traveling, and in the night, somewhere in UP around that side, and it was dark after 10 or so. He was very hungry, so he goes to a dhaba, and the dhaba was closing. He has already closed. He has, you know, the fire was already out, but this man was so hungry. He kept on telling, "See, I'm very hungry," you know. So the dhaba man, he had already closed. So what he did, he went to the kitchen, his kitchen, house kitchen. He made and he fed him. And then as he was leaving, he gave him money. So the dhaba man was telling, "No, I won't take money, because in my kitchen, this is not for sale. What I made in my kitchen. If I had made it for you from the dhaba, I would have charged you. But this I will not sell." Can you tell this kind of thing will ever happen in modernity? This is the thing, you know, this is hospitality.
Okay, so I guess those are the questions. Any more questions? Okay. Do you have anything
Hello.
else you want? Oh, okay. Wait.
Hello, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
First, thank you, sir, for a wonderful talk. It was really amazing hearing you.
Yeah.
I've always felt that we have been conditioned by the society or the education system, as I
Yeah.
feel that I'm one of a perfect example of a conditioned person.
Yeah.
I pursued science. I graduated from science with mathematics major. Till school, I was good in science and mathematics. So I thought that I'll pursue a career in mathematics. So I did, but I could not do so well. I somehow passed. So then again, all of a sudden I jumped into commerce. I started pursuing charter accountancy. But that also I did not clear. I completed till inter IPCC, and the final stage is still due. I have stopped appearing. I appeared for twice or thrice. I could not clear my final. Then I had quit my exams. But then after when I had jumped into commerce, then I realized that I'm good in commerce. I wasn't made for science. I was made for commerce. Then
Yeah.
again, when I couldn't complete it, now I'm interested in few other things. And I thought, now I think that I'm not made for all these things. But I have realized these things only after I've experienced failures in my
Neha, we
life.
have to conclude soon, so it'll be great if you could ask your question.
Yeah. So what I was saying, as you were saying, that we should not be taught, or means we should not be conditioned. But what I have experienced in my life, the what I love or what I am made for, that I've only experienced only after the failures that I had, or which I could not. So how would a child know that what he is made for, what he must do? Hello.
Actually, what is being offered is very bad food, na? See, the problem is that right from the word go, it is bad. Hardly ever any child really likes to go. First of all, this idea of a school itself, at least up to 12 years, is something that you should not think of at all. If at all, if you want to have a school, that should be after 14, maybe, I don't know. So, no, I don't have a ready-made answer for this. I mean, you can see that in a traditional society, when you leave children alone, that there is a natural tendency, intelligence that is awakened, and they start doing things and they start learning. So maybe we should study that, and and you have a good example of something that you shouldn't be doing, which is the modern schooling system. You know, I really see the thing with modern, lifestyle is that there is no place left for children. This is the whole problem. You know, none of the modern households are fit for, both the way the very architecture, the environment, what happens in the house. Absolutely, there is no child, there is no place for children in modernity. That's it's absolutely a problematic kind of space, you know.
Yeah.
So this has to be. It's not a simple answer, that we have to really come together and start doing deeper exploration as to what is all this, and yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, sir. If you want to share where people can reach out to you or follow what work you do.
Yeah, no, I'm doing different kinds of activities. Of course, they can use my email is there, jinankb@gmail.com, and my website is there, jinankb.in. And of course, we have a foundation called Existential Knowledge Foundation, and same name has website also, org, where we are actually, we're trying to get more and more people into this exploration. There is no other, thing that we have. As much confusion as you can create in people, better. That's all. At least make them feel miserable. So that at least they begin to explore. Because see, it's all about self-exploration. What will prompt you to shift out of your comfort zone and start exploring is the issue. The problem is that modernity is giving you salary, comfort, and all that. No, so there is no compulsion for you to, you know. But in spite of all that, if you feel miserable, then one should. So that's what.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure listening to you. Yeah. And I hope people take away something from this. All right.
Okay.